We are reading from Leviticus chapter 8. We've been walking through this, and of course, the first part of Leviticus you're talking about are the ways in which God wants to provide us physically and spiritually. And now we are moving into the consecration of Aaron and his sons. So, unless there are any questions from our previous studies, with none of those, then I'll jump in. My first paragraph is 8 verses 1 through 4. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take Aaron and his sons and the garments and the anointing oil and the bull of the sin offering and the 2 rams and the basket of unleavened bread, and assemble all the congregation at the entrance of the tent of meeting." And Moses did as the Lord commanded him, and the congregation was assembled at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Not much there, but any questions or comments?
Can you imagine all those people in front of the tent meeting?
I wonder if it was sort of like church, no, well, probably the exact opposite of church. You gotta get there early if you want a back seat, you know. They're gonna get there early if you want the front seats. It's kind of like being on the road. Very well could, and on the corner, very well. And in fact, very, very simple.
Well, it had a bull and 2 rams on it.
For the entire congregation, everybody gets a taste. That's about it. When we're talking about potentially, you know, like I said, my rough guesstimate is about 3.6 million people. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You gotta get there early if you want to see. Any other thoughts? Let's keep going. 5 through 9 is my next paragraph. And Moses said to the congregation, "This is the thing that the Lord has commanded to be done." And Moses brought Aaron and his sons and washed them with water. And he put the coat on him and tied the sash around his waist and clothed him with the robe, put the ephod on him and tied the skillfully woven band of the ephod around him, binding it to him with the band. And he placed the breastpiece on him, and in the breastpiece he put the Urim and the Thummim. And he set the turban on his head, and on the turban in front he set the golden plate, the holy crown, as the Lord commanded Moses. And it has that look to it, doesn't it? Or, probably more accurately, the coronation looks a lot like the commission. What do you think? And I can see your brain stick.
I was thinking something else, but like, it talks about the unleavened bread and like, I mean, we talked about how like leavened bread, like the space and like represents like sin and like the do you think that the night of the Last Supper, Jesus had unleavened or leavened bread?
It was a Passover feast, so therefore absolutely.
What did you think about
There's a part of me, I'm assuming he wasn't completely naked. But it says they were washed publicly in front of her. Why do you think that was done in public?
I mean, if you're bathing in a very private matter, but like, whenever you're being cleansed in front of other people, there's nothing you can hide, there's no way that you can. Everyone can see that you're being cleansed. Makes you vulnerable too, though.
So yeah, there's a level of vulnerability here. There's absolutely nothing being hidden. And it makes me think about with Mindy and Dee not here, Mindy always makes the point of talking about how this points to something very different, right? This is a very hard way of living, but yet we can see that it creates a very different culture of how we live. And so by him being bathed publicly in front of everybody, there's a symbolism saying he is clean. He is ready for this position.
But wouldn't you already think that he would have been, if he was back for this position or not?
Well, I mean, I'm sure the people from the tribe of Levi, those Danites, they don't like the Levites, so, you gotta make sure that that guy really is worthy. I think there's a reality in which most people would assume because Aaron was chosen by God, but we've already seen there's been some revolt against him, and as we move into the book of Numbers, we'll see even more. And so I think that there's this question about why was Aaron chosen? Why was Moses chosen? Couldn't it be anybody? Leave it there for him.
Like according to God's plan.
Well, and of course there's that. I mean, we acknowledge as Christians that God has a plan and that there are people chosen for different tasks. But remember, this is a people group that aren't used to God choosing anyone. They have, up until being a chosen people, they had felt abandoned. And so I'm certain that there is a question as to what makes Moses and Aaron more special than anybody else.
But don't you think for the longest time Moses probably he was worthy of that position?
Oh, I'm certain. Remember, he's
He's probably still to stay, I mean, where we're at here.
well, I mean, let's look at the evidence. Moses was a murderer. He ran away from justice. He hid in the desert for 40 years. Yeah, he told God he couldn't talk and he should send somebody else. Aaron's not really any better because one of the first acts Aaron does is create the golden calf. And then he just blames it on accident coming out of the fire. I just tossed the gold in it. I didn't do anything. How comes this calf? Yeah, magic calf,
I don't mind a shot on
So my assumption is still that they probably weren't completely naked, but I think that there needed to be this public washing to show they were being set aside for something else.
It's symbolic, I think, don't you?
Yeah. Because if he is washed and he is presented and he is made whole, then when he comes before God on behalf of the people, it allows, or it is symbolic, it shows that he is worthy.
Didn't that become standard procedure for them to go and worship? They have to.
Absolutely. And so I think that it's got us, that was Mindy's point, usually it has to start with the leadership. And so if Aaron is going to be the high priest, it has to start there. And then it moves down from there. Aaron and his sons, the priests, they do it. The Levites would have been washed and presented, and then the people would have been washed and presented.
So, visual, I think that there's nothing that we have, been taught in the, when creating the tabernacle, the tent, there was no like big barrel of water for things to be clean, was there?
Yes.
So maybe they were robed and went into this big old barrel.
Remember the basin
Yes,
that they primarily used for washing hands, but that was used to wash everything.
so it would have been huge.
The one in the temple, the one that was built for the temple permanently, sat on the back of 12 bull statues. And they've done the math, and it's probably about 12 foot deep in the center. It would have been massive. But the one for the tabernacle is still probably about, I think we did the math, it's about 6 foot around. So that could easily be 3 foot deep.
Where do you get the water in this?
Wilderness, not desert.
Oh,
God does provide. But I want us to move away from that notion of desert. They're in the wilderness.
so there could be streams.
There were streams all over. Well, I mean, isn't that kind of what Moses did? Right. Make it, water comes out.
I'm sure the lake did not look as back then as it does now, I mean, it's,
And we had that discussion.
like, especially if you look at Kings, it's like, it talks about how David's family ended up turning away. Would be like, the land's barren now, so, I mean, I'm sure it definitely will be farther unless you agree with.
Yep. And we've talked about that, and many people will talk about that somewhat as a theory, but a lot of geologists and will talk about the fact that by nature of the ice age, it would have been more temperate. Anything else? Verse 10 through 13. Then Moses took the anointing oil and anointed the tabernacle, all that was in it, and consecrated it. And he sprinkled some of it on the altar 7 times, and anointed the altar and all its utensils, and the basin and its stand to consecrate it. And he poured some of the anointing oil on his head and anointed him to consecrate him. And Moses brought Aaron's sons, and clothed them with coats, and tied sashes around their waists, and bound caps on them. Or commanded Moses.
I mean,
Currently 4.
Oh,
We don't know for certain, but they have to have been at least 20 years old. Or older, because in order to serve in the tabernacle, in general, we were supposed to be between 20 and 80. Of course, Aaron is much older.
Even though, no, your friends.
No, you're not old enough yet. It's only amongst the priestly family that you got this. You're an adult, I think at about 16 otherwise. What else do you notice? Anything? Joyce, your question earlier, the basin that they mentioned right there is what I wash. Yes. My translation says in verse 10, anointed that. Is that what yours says too, or anointed it? Verse 10.
Mine was,
Verse 10.
tabernacle, it says it, but, and it also has and.
Let's take a look at.
oh, there she said, I mean, was it the items or them as the people?
I think realistically, he had to anoint the items first, because then the items are used in the consecration service. Does that make sense? I think he anoints all of the items that are discussed
First
first,
going to be used.
that are gonna. And then they probably anoint the basin, and then he washes in the basin and then anoints Aaron and his sons. That'd be my assumption. And yeah, it's talking about with them is the. Any other thoughts or questions?
So they wash the person, but not the others.
Well, I mean, the reality is everything that he just anointed was, came through the fire. I mean, it's all gold plated, it's made out of complete gold, it's made out of complete bronze. So it would be pure refiner's fire. That is. Anything else? Right. Go. 14 through 17. Then he brought the bull of the sin offering, and Aaron and his sons laid their hands on the head of the bull of the sin offering. And he killed it, and Moses took the blood, and with his finger put it on the horns of the altar, around it, and purified the altar, poured out the blood at the base of the altar, and consecrated it to make atonement for it. And he took all the fat that was on the entrails, the long lobe of the liver, and 2 kidneys with their fat, and Moses burned them on the altar. But the bull and its skin and its flesh and its dung he burned up with fire outside the cave, as the Lord commanded.
Why does yours say wrong?
It's a good question. Verse 7. What's yours?
When it's off that, hold that, the,
And then customs versus.
So I'm guessing they're saying intestines to be more discreet. Yeah, we were talking about holy crap, it's crap. Dung is still a nicer way of saying it. I would say intestines is their body part. Yeah, they're trying to be a little more discreet. It's not technically an inaccurate statement to translate it as intestines, but it's not completely accurate either.
well, they contained them.
Right.
Makes sense.
All I can be like imagining those like the entrails of this bull and just scraping all the fat off of it. Just imagining. Yeah,
Okay, that was not a picture I had in my head,
that is one like.
but I guess on a technicality, it's not inaccurate, right? You took all the fat off of all the organs with the long lobe of the liver and the 2 kidneys and burnt that, took everything else outside to burn it completely.
That's like you feel good here.
Yeah.
They take all the insides out, right?
Yep.
So that's what we're kind of talking about.
That concept, except that because this is the first consecration offering, the only thing that is actually offered on the altar is blood that is put on the outside, and then the fat, the kidneys, and the liver that is actually burnt on the altar. Everything else is taken out. This would be looking at our thing. This would be an olah. This is a whole burnt offering. They are seeking God's blessing on the tabernacle. Now they're not going to burn it on the altar because up until this point, the altar was consecrated. So this one, and only this one, is burnt outside.
Okay, so for this offering, who supplies the bull and the 2 rams?
I'm guessing Aaron. I mean, they are used for his consecration and ordination, so his atonement. So my assumption is probably he. However, it could be just by leadership. That's a good question. Does it make a difference? If the leadership presents it, and there's a sense in which the leadership of the whole, as a whole, is consecrated. If it's Aaron who presents it, then does it really say? It just says that Moses brought the animals. It doesn't say who actually gave it. That's
Mine says presented the whole.
he presented it, so he's definitely not the one who's giving it. Moses is the one giving it. If he is, for this time, and again, we talked about this back in Exodus, for this time and this time only, he is functioning as the high priest. But once Aaron is consecrated and ordained, he will no longer function.
He goes into retirement.
He becomes the prophet and no longer he becomes the political leader and not the religious.
But the way they were was, and that would be a big demand to ask if somebody gave 2 grams to.
Either it was given from Aaron and Moses' family, or they probably would spread it out. Of course, by the same token, it could be people willing want it.
That's the person that
Yeah, it could be like the ram with Abraham and Isaac, and God could have just, here you go, this is mine, I'm bringing it.
Like a ram, just kind of walking down that pathway, and be like.
No, it's the bull with 2 rams right behind, just, it's like Noah's Ark, where they come.
Okay.
I mean, we really don't know. And to a certain degree, it's interesting to think about, but I don't think in this case it makes much difference. But I don't.
However, wouldn't you want the best of the best for that though?
Oh, I'm certain, but it would have been a bull and 2 grams without blemish. It would have been the firstborn, almost certainly.
So it definitely probably wasn't, they probably didn't trust some random people walking down the road,
Very true.
so.
It's funny to think about it that way. You're right. It more than likely would have been someone who had offered to know that it met the criteria of being God required in sacrifice.
That's not really stated in this path.
It's not. That part is left up to speculation. It's not really.
Before, but specified.
Yes, absolutely. With every other sacrifice we've seen so far, both in Exodus and in Leviticus, it's been very clear who's giving. But for whatever reason, this one isn't. Personally, I highly doubt that it would be someone who's excommunicated this offering.
Well, they don't use the term.
Oh, okay, so you're saying that someone who was in good standing and later on they messed up, and so their name was stricken from the book. Interesting theory, we'll put it on the shelf. Any other thoughts?
When they were eating the manna and pigeons, right?
Yep, they were eating manna and quail.
So they probably didn't have a lot of livestock, because if they had livestock, then they wouldn't have had to ask God for the meat.
Well, so you're bringing up a good point, that we didn't really talk about a whole lot back when that came up. One of the things we have to remember is the people of this time would look at us today as horribly violent meat eaters. The amount of meat we consume would be appalling. They do not eat meat like we do. When it's not that they didn't eat, they just didn't eat it as often. Their diets did not have, they got most of the protein in other ways. So when they asked for the meat, that God sent quail. One of the things we talked about is, I think this was before you came on board, is that these sacrifices it was. I mean, like the cow, the oxen were workhorses. This was your tractor. You didn't just butcher a cow because, you know, I'm building my steak. They just didn't do that. They were rare, you know, and the wool, heifer only has often one calf. Sometimes you get lucky and you get twins. That's rare. And so the fact of giving up this animal was a big sacrifice. The sheep and goats, they actually kept around primarily for their milk and for their wool and hair, and they used that for their textiles. And so to butcher these animals would be to sacrifice their economic value. And so it was extremely rare. It had to be a big deal occasion to butcher an animal. Which is why I think God sent quail, because let's face it, quail are not all that big. But enough quail to be 3 foot deep. Quail. I want to know where all the feathers are. So, to a certain degree, yes, but I just don't think that they, from everything we've read and everything we've found out about their culture, they just did not compete as often. Which is why I have said, I think for them, the notion of eating meat was a celebration. It's always during a festival or a feast of something. Which is again why I say, I think it's a thing. But in order to keep it out there, you use it regularly. At least once a month, right? Any other questions or thoughts? No other questions up there. All right. 18 to 21. Then he presented the ram of the burnt offering, and Aaron and his sons laid their hands on the head of the ram, and he killed it, and Moses threw the blood against the sides of the altar. He cut the ram into pieces, and Moses burned the head, the pieces, and the back. He washed the entrails and the legs with water. Moses burned the whole ram on the altar. It was a burnt offering with pleasing aroma, food offering with words of Moses. So the first one, the bull was used to consecrate the altar, and then it was burned outside. But this one was burned on the altar, because now the altar is consecrated.
So does it mean that it did not eat any of that meat?
Nope, whole burnt offering. A pleasing aroma unto them.
How do you get a pleasing aroma out of
Cooking meat.
that? And everything else? Yeah.
Not on this. The first one, everything is burned outside. This is a whole burnt offering that you remember out when we discussed the whole burnt offering. The animal itself was burnt on the altar, but the skin, the head, the organs were all taken outside and put in the ash.
That's not what it says here. Is it?
So they burn the head.
They burned the head to pieces in fact. And washed the entrails in with water. Okay, I guess you're right. I got that one wrong. This one they burned everything. But it doesn't say the skin. There's an assumption there, I guess. But it's still cooking meat is cooking meat. It still smells like. At least maybe to me, but I am carnivore. Any other thoughts or questions? I can admit it, I was wrong. You're right. Yeah. Keep going, or not?
This was they call it a fire altar. So it's been on.
Here's just that language. Verse 2, and it's in verse 21, right?
Yeah.
So this, I need to update my chart because this is, fire offering is the same thing as a food offering.
Well, this is a ring.
This is a ring. It uses that terminology very clearly, fire offering. Because I remember us having this discussion, 21, the very end of the verse. It's 21, right?
Yes.
So the word is a fire offering. But the ESV, which is what mine is, translates that fire as a food. The concept here is that it is meant to be given in a way that it is consumed. In this instance, God is eating the food because it is a sin offering to make atonement for Aaron and his sons. Remember the concept of a peace offering, Madison. When it's a peace offering, the two parties who are being brought back together, both of them partake. But in this instance, God is the one who was wrong, therefore God is the one who consumes it. Make sense? Any other questions? That's a lot longer, so I'm sure. Okay, 22 through 29. Then he presented the other ram, the ram of ordination. Aaron and his sons laid their hands on the head of the ram. He killed it, and Moses took some of the blood and put it on the lobe of Aaron's right ear, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. Then he presented Aaron's sons, and Moses put some of the blood on the lobes of their right ears, and on the thumbs of the right hand, and on the big toes of the right foot. And Moses threw the blood against the side of the altar. Then he took the fat and the fatty and the fat tail and all the fat that is on the entrails and the long lobe of the liver and the two kidneys with their fat and the right thigh. And out of the basket of unleavened bread that was before the Lord, he took one unleavened loaf and one loaf of bread with oil and one wafer and placed them on the pieces of fat and on the right thigh. And he put all these in the hands of Aaron and in the hands of his sons and weighed them as a wave offering. Then Moses took them from their hands and burned them on the altar with the fire. This was an ordination offering with a pleasing aroma, a food offering to the Lord. And Moses took the breast and weighed it for a wave offering before the Lord. It was Moses' portion of the ram of ordination as the Lord commanded Moses. So again, there at the end of 27. What was that? 28. Yours probably said a fire right there. So yeah, I'm not sure why. I mean, I get what the ESV is doing, but it's not an inaccurate, it's just not as literal as what. So it's an ordination. Part of it is being weighed before God, representative part. In a normal ordination offering, sometimes the priest who is officiating would receive that portion. But because Moses is not a priest, that portion all goes to God, because God is the one doing the ordaining. The breast, which already goes to the officiant, does go to Moses. That's his portion. Make sense?
But if you did then the right ear, right hand, right foot.
Yes. So when they are,
I've been thinking about it because your right hand man is in your right ear. If God is your right hand man, he should be the one talking to your
so
ear.
it's kind of in that direction. So the blood is being used to anoint, consecrated. That their hearing might be pure. They would listen for what God is telling them to listen to. Their right hand, that they would do what God is telling them to do. And their right foot, that they would go where God is telling them to go. The only thing that they don't do is they don't actually anoint their lips, which would be the fourth thing that often gets anointed. And their head. Their head is the way they're thinking. The lips are what you say, right? Why do you think they would only do those three and not their mind and their mouth? I mean, there's readiness for every God.
Is it like monks with the wrong time?
No, but you're getting closer. A priest is not, at this point, in this context, is not what we see in a Catholic priest or what we see in a Protestant pastor. Their job is not to preach. Their job is not to be the theologian, to bring higher thoughts. As a priest, their job is only to listen, to follow, and receive. A priest's job is to connect people with God. So they become God's ears as they receive the sin offerings and people confess. They take those things and they become God's hands as they offer those sacrifices. And they are God's feet in that they go where God tells them to go. But to be clear, the prophet is the one who speaks on God's behalf. They're not being asked to be prophets. They're being asked to be priests.
They're all right.
Well, you do know why they did the right and not the left, right? I mean, we've already talked about John Yates. We might as well just get it out. The left hand was considered the unclean hand. It's actually the cleanest. So therefore, you anointed the right hand because that is the one that would act. And to shake someone's hand with their left hand was to essentially invite them to receive your uncleanness. Shake their hand with the right hand is to offer them fellowship.
You know, one of the Latin words for that is sinister.
Yeah. We made something out of that happen. Doesn't mean left anymore. It tends to be evil or conniving or diabolical. But yes, it used to just mean that. So do you get that distinction? We have within Christianity, we've taken the role of priest and the role of prophet and kind of put them together to make one new, right? We expect the pastor or in the Catholic Church, priest to be the prophet who speaks on behalf of God, and the priest who mediates between God and man. We've conflated the roles. But after this ordination, God separates them out. From this point forward, Moses becomes the prophet and Aaron is the priest. Moses is actually the prophet and the judge in Aaron is the priest. But my reading of it is, had Moses not refused, he probably would have been all three.
But what is Aaron's son?
They're priests.
The priest also.
Yes. From this point forward, it's Aaron's family that will be the high priest. And the Levites, by extension, are priestly assistants and servants. Anything else?
So Aaron's family, just the grandsons would move up and.
Yep. They would be raised in the family business. And at the age of 20, the young men would then be ordained themselves for the work. Any other thoughts or questions? Next verse is my next paragraph, so let's go with that. Then Moses took some of the anointing oil and of the blood that was on the altar and sprinkled it on Aaron and his garments, and also on his sons and his sons' garments. So he consecrated Aaron and his garments, and his sons garments with him. You remember the concept of consecration and ordination? We had that conversation.
How long are they gonna stay on guard the ordination will not?
For those of you who couldn't hear, she's just saying I'm glad before ordination wasn't like this. They didn't kill an animal when I got ordained. Did they kill an animal when you got ordained? Nope, didn't work that way. We didn't have to kill an animal because remember, Jesus gave his life.
I was thinking, reading this, and they're sprinkling oil and blood in these beautiful garments, and they're just in made, and they got blood all on them, and that's for, that's not.
And the wives when they get in that, what, just what?
Yeah.
Oh.
After I've watched you do a lot of things and going down on Mondays and helping the moving ladies with all the work they put into it, I can see where that's. Why didn't you anoint him before you put the clothes on?
Base.
And again, the reason for that is these clothes were passed down. Generation to generation to generation.
Gosh, those things must come out really easy. Yeah.
Can't believe that.
Now, remember, these are God's items. He probably made sure that they were stain resistant. Just saying, what's last forever? He's gonna make sure. Speculation, but you know.
Doesn't tell us that that's unbelievable, that's her job.
Aaron's wife's job is to scrub the blood out of their garments. It would be Aaron's wife's maidservant's job was to scrub the blood out.
Were they jump ordination robe stuff?
So
They wear them all.
these ordination robes would have been used every time they were in service at the temple.
Okay.
It was, again, it's this, and when I do wear it, it's what I told you guys before, I think. Hopefully. That when we as clergy wear the robe, when we wear the stole, it is a sign of our office. It's a sign that we are covered under God, and that we are moving forward on behalf of God to do this work. So every time that they were functioning as priests, they had to at least be wearing the priestly linen garments and sash. And they would all have their own turbans. But the person who's functioning as a high priest would have had the extra garments on. So you would always have to be doing the part. Don says, I think odors the same possibly be a precious memory for them of relatives in the past. So see now, isn't that a nicer way of thinking?
Oh, they'll be.
There you go. See,
That's not, that's the video.
that splatter right there was whenever Aaron. Splatter, here's for everyone. That was for Eliezer, you know? Think of that. We don't tell stories like that, do we? For us, it might be a face scent. I might give my mother on the clothing, sector, when I clean up her things and make. Yeah, there's a sense in which I think that that's what's meant to be happening. This is an extremely precious moment in the life of the people of Israel. And yes, to a certain degree, we would think about the audacity of staining that garment. It's newly made, it's beautiful, it's to a certain degree compared to people, it's awesome. And yet, there is a sense in which this is meant to be a holy moment. It's meant to be something that is real. It little bit of a preview. So Sunday sermon is on deck. We talk about emotion, right? And Jesus very clearly, when he is resurrected Christ, he still has the holes in his hands, his feet, and a puncture in his side. He doesn't get rid of them. Those are important things to remember. He could have been resurrected and being made completely whole. And it would have been just as true, right? But they're left there on purpose because of what they mean. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we feel really sad when we see him, that with because we would be reminded of the crucifixion, we'd be reminded of all that. And there's nothing bad in heaven.
So the moment we get to heaven, though, you won't see those wounds as a sign of the evil. Instead, you'll see them as a sign of his love.
Plus the proof of who he is.
Absolutely. You know, that's the thing. We've been seeing all throughout the book of Exodus and Leviticus. These things that to our modern sensibilities seem so foreign and seem so violent and seem so cruel, when we take a closer look at them, we see a different meaning behind it, right? And we're seeing them for a greater meaning that the people would have received them under. For us, we see this as a cruel thing, and yet for them, they would say, no, this is where God made us right. Where once we were not a people, God took us out of Egypt and made us a people. And then he took us not just a people, but he brought us into his presence and he made us right. He came and he dwelled amongst us and he gave us people to help us know that we would always have an opportunity to be right with God. That when the other nations say, you can't be right with God, how can you control the gods? How can you know what the gods are? No, our God said, here is the priesthood. They will remind you that you are made right. So if ever you doubted that God loved you, if ever you doubted that God forgave you, if ever you doubted that God had a plan for you, you look at the tabernacle and you remember your offerings, you remember the ordination, you remember the consecration. There's all of these things that are constantly there before you. Now, yes, I can hear somebody saying, but if they're always there before you, wouldn't it be easy to forget? For it to just become a rote, repetitious thing that you kind of lose sight of. Yes, it absolutely could, and it did for many. But that's not the way God intended.
Just like how a lot of people are partying.
Absolutely.
If you're just going through the motions, not actually worshiping.
If you come to church and you go through the motions and sing the songs and you read along, but you're not putting your heart in it, if you're letting your mind be somewhere else, is it anything more than is it really worship? And to be honest, we're probably all guilty from time to time. But that's why, periodically, at least for me in my ministry, notice I would try to change things up every so often. I want us to think about things. I want us to make sure that it doesn't become a routine, but instead that it is always a reminder that each and every week, what we do on Sunday morning should really just be a reflection of what we've been doing all week.
You mean when I sat there and go, oh, sermon.
When you mess me up and tell me other side.
Okay, are we sure, 100% sure? The same day I walk in and Jesus meets me, are we sure? The holes are gonna be
Well,
just be inside guard.
from what we have read in scripture, what scripture tells us at the end of the Gospels, within the book of Acts, and specifically within the book of Revelation, yes. It acknowledges that those things are still there. Now, if you don't need to see those things, then I'm certain you could see the whole glory of it. But I mean, it makes it very clear, Revelation says he is both the Lion of Judah and the Lamb that was slain before the foundations of the earth. And so I think that they will be there here as a reminder of his love. Any other thoughts? Yeah. But they did not have zillions of distractions we have, so perhaps did not become. Oh, we'd like to hope, right?
But if they had to spend the weekend in Colorado.
Oh, I was gonna say the same thing. I'm certain there's all kinds of things to keep them distracted.
I'm just thinking of the scene from Hercules where there's like a bunch of people and where's the fire? I'm just the boy that you're doing, and there's all the hustle about going around.
You know, they would have their very same things that they would worry about and be concerned about. It's just, we've got newfangled ways of doing it. We're on, for those who are on Facebook, where are they going on vacation now? And where's that big truck? Where do they sell at? You say, okay. In some ways, our overconnection is a good thing, and in some ways it's a very bad. But I don't know that it's really indifferent. I'm pretty sure that our enemy is pretty good at getting us distracted. And I'm pretty sure as broken, fallen human beings, we're pretty good at letting ourselves get distracted. We don't need the shiny thing. We can get distracted with a stick and with dirt.
It was a stick and not so it. Pretty quick.
Any other thoughts? Okay, we'll finish the chapter. 31 through 36. And Moses said to Aaron and his sons, boil the flesh at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and there eat it, and the bread that is in the basket of the ordination offerings, as I commanded, saying, Aaron and his sons shall eat it. And what remains of the flesh and the bread you shall burn up with fire. And you shall not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting for 7 days until the days of your ordination are completed. For it will take 7 days to ordain you, as has been done today. The Lord has commanded to be done to make atonement for you. At the entrance of the tent of meeting, you shall remain day and night for 7 days, performing what the Lord has charged, so that you do not die. For so I have been commanded. And Aaron and his son did all the things the Lord commanded by Moses.
Kind of interesting that I'm so good for. Because for me, like, when I can cook, I, like, cooking meat, I can barbecue, but when I make boil, I can. So like, I find it interesting that.
Barbecue stew. And I'll take either one.
Stew will last a while. Just like more water in. More stew.
What else do you notice? What stands out to you?
They don't need more food.
That basket of food and that animal apparently is either supposed to last them the whole time, or as they move forward, the next days they would do more sacrifices. Because there were daily sacrifices to be offered.
So they sat at the opening for 7 days. Were people allowed to come in and out during that?
It's a good question. I think until such a time as their ordination was complete, Moses was the one functioning as the high priest. So my assumption is there were still daily offerings, because the tabernacle was set up and God commanded daily offerings. So they were there almost as their greeters for the next 7 days. Congratulations. And as a good friend of mine, who's since gone home, he said, likes to quote the Psalms, better to be a greeter in the house of the Lord than dwell in the tents.
And they would serve ritually every day.
They would not have redone the ordination. They would have simply been there as the priests. And Moses would have done the rituals until their ordination is complete. They would not have been able to completely participate as priests until their ordination was done.
You think that was just so they would sit and think about it? I mean, what would
So how long did they sit there?
7 days? And
Why?
they-
Why?
7 days of creation,
What?
7 days of creation.
Well, they would be entitled to a Sabbath.
They would rotate Sabbaths, but in this instance, they have to be ordained. The ordination ritual has to take place over 7 days, day and night, because remember the tabernacle is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Just like it is.
I mean, just,
Well, no, Denny's does close.
how much do you think that would change you as a person? You could not leave for 7 days. And you just had to watch when people came by.
Day 4.
Like, how much do you think it would take you? You'd see all sorts of people. You would probably see just about everyone.
In 7 days' time, you could see almost everyone who would have brought forward.
How many stories would you hear? What would you?
There is a sense in which, remember, 7 is the number of completeness. There is a reality that for each day that they are participating in that ordination ceremony, they are representatively being ordained for that Monday for all time, that Tuesday for all time, Wednesday for all time. So it means, you don't want, do you really want me to just be ordained for Sunday? Or do you want me to be ordained for the whole week? At least 6 days. Thank you, I appreciate you having me out. Does that mean that I get to be really unholy on this, on Saturday? On Friday? Okay. Sorry, dear, they said I get to be unholy on.
That's your daily barbecue.
That's my favorite part. No. Remember the other 6 days of part. We do sushi on the 7th day. Said that purely for your benefit. Sushi. You can't cook anything on your Sabbath day, right? Gold pizza. There is a sense in which this ordination has to be. And they can be called to serve God any day at any time. Yes, there are supposed to have, but within the priesthood, remember, we read before, that if they had to work on the priesthood, they had to work on the Sabbath.
Also today, or no,
I would assume that there probably was some level of ceremony with each day. My assumption is probably they were, Madison mentioned what you would overhear, what you would see. I'm certain that those 7 days they were meant to watch Moses as he performed those daily sacrifices, learn what was happening before they actually. As time went on, there would be a level of apprenticeship where you see your dad, your grandpa, uncles doing this over and over and over. But in this instance, yes, remember, Moses got all of this downloaded from the cloud onto his tablet, right? He saw it, the vision. He was given these instructions, but no one else. there's a reality that maybe Joshua saw. Remember, Joshua was his scribe, and it does mention he goes up. But as far as we know, Moses is the only one who knows how these rituals are to be done. He's the only one who's seen it. So therefore, those 7 days truly are Aaron and his son's training this task.
So every time there was a time for a new generation come up, they had this.
The new generation would have to go through this ordination ritual, and they would have to sit at the tent, at the gate for 7 days, and they would have to watch, and they would have to listen, and they would have to greet, and they'd have to do all of these things in preparation for when they were finally allowed to come in and function as priests. Yes.
It was a good possibility that God was also speaking to them on earth.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely believe that. You know, up until this point, you know, every time that it mentioned that Moses went to the gate of the tent of meeting, that's when he stood face to face and talked with God, remember? That's the imagery that's being presented in this too. These individuals are being ordained, and they're coming to the gates to meet with God, to hear from him, to learn from him, to see what he wants them to see, to know what he wants them to know, so that they can be prepared to then be on the other side, be God's representative to those who come to bring their sacrifices. Any other thoughts on chapter 8? Yeah.
I've got this image of Brandon Blake trying to sit there for 7 days, so next, so like,
No. You didn't see them when they were little and we were butchering the sheep. They want to get their hands in there and be involved.
but by the 7th night, they're sitting there, can I please go, oh.
That would probably be night 5, and then night 6 we did address. No, I get what you're saying. There's a sense in which they have to move beyond that.
It doesn't say that they are awake at all.
It doesn't say that they cannot sleep, it just says that they are dating.
Dancing around steps.
Any other thoughts on chapter
I feel like also if for this kind of ceremony, there wouldn't be just that sense of calm the entire time.
8? I think that remember, that pillar of cloud and pillar of fire is still resting on top of the tabernacle. It's right there. And to the best. I'm a little bit of a nerd. I read a lot of things. All of the Tolkien books, right? And if you've watched the movie or if you've watched the movie or read the books, there's the negative sense of the eye of Sauron, right? This would have that kind of feel, but in the exact opposite. The pillar of fire was present. God was present. God took note of everybody who was there. And while to a certain degree, it's the holiness of God. And so there's a degree into which you would be unnerved because we are not, right? And yet, by the same token, within that holiness, you would also feel God's love because you are invited in. Absolutely.
But you have curiosity.
Curiosity would be there, yes. The protection, I mean, remember, we're still just only about, we're looking at maybe 120 days since the Exodus, at most at this point, maximum. 40 days the first time on the mountain, 40 days the second time on the mountain. It was like 28 days until they got to the mountain or so. So realistically, well, no, it did take a year, but still, we're talking almost a year after that, they still remember when that pillar of cloud and fire went behind them and protected them from Pharaoh's army. They still remember that, God going before them. And so, yeah, I think that there would be that sense of protection, there would be that sense of awe, there would be that sense of curiosity. By the same token, they would still have that sense of fear that they had whenever he spoke the Ten Commandments to them, to all of the people. And then they said, whoa, 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 time out, Moses. You go speak to God on our behalf. You speak to us on God's behalf. Because they were afraid of being undone, because they experienced the holiness of God, the true presence. And then to see that here at the tabernacle, it would bring all of that fear, awe, wonder, protection, love, all of it. Any other thoughts? We're into 9 then. First paragraph of chapter 9. What? Yours says 1 through 4. Mine goes 1 through 7. So I'll do 1 through 7 since that's what mine is. On the 8th day, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel, and he said to Aaron, take for yourself a bull calf for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering, both without blemish, and offer them before the Lord. And say to the people of Israel, take a male goat for a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb both a year old without blemish for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for peace offerings, which you sacrifice before the Lord, and a grain offering mixed with oil. For today the Lord will appear to you. And they brought what Moses commanded in front of the tent of meeting. And all the congregation drew near and stood before the Lord. And Moses said, this is the thing that the Lord commanded you to do, that the glory of the Lord may appear to you. Then Moses said to Aaron, draw near to the altar and offer your sin offering and your burnt offering, make atonement for yourself and for the people, and bring the offering of the people and make atonement for them, as the Lord has commanded.
They just had a pit there, animals.
Well, at least they had all the animals had come out. Who's offering the sacrifice now?
Aaron and sons.
Aaron and his sons. Prior to this, it was Moses. Shift has happened. Now Aaron is being asked to make atonement for himself and for the people. What else do you notice?
Take it again about it, I was wondering.
Unblemished. It didn't necessarily accentuate that part, but this time they're saying, no, this is specifically for atonement. This is for you and for the people. Make sure it is unblemished.
They include the elders.
It includes the elders. The elders as a representation of the entire.
Even though you said this is only a little over a year in time. Pretty long.
Up to this point, there hasn't been a one, because there wasn't the altar to offer.
But there has been.
Trying to think. I don't think before this point there were any sacrifices. There were offerings given to God, but not any sacrifices. Yeah, no, I don't. Prior to this, no sacrifice.
Oh,
Just offerings.
several, quite a few animals.
Were offered, but they weren't sacrificed. They might have been offered to do the work. That were not sacrificed. moving forward from this point on, there will be daily sacrifices. Remember, when we talked about these, that notion of that someone might have sinned somewhere, so we're going to offer a sin offering every day just to make sure we're covered. Because Gary, he has a tendency to forget that he did something wrong and he just moves on. Sorry, you walked in just as I was saying. And if you don't fess up to it, she's gonna fess up for you.
Let's move on here. It says, for today, the Lord will appear to you. Is it gonna be different? I mean, using the fuller fire and. So, how's it gonna be different?
So you need to keep reading and see. Because it hasn't told us how it's gonna be different.
I think that,
You guys see what it was, right? I'm just getting back there. Read the experiment, 8 through 11. So Aaron drew near to the altar and killed the calf of the sin offering, which was for himself. And the sons of Aaron presented the blood to him, and he dipped his finger in the blood and put it on the horns of the altar and poured out the blood in the base of the altar. But the fat and the kidneys and the long lobe of the liver from the sin offering he burned on the altar as the Lord had commanded. The flesh and the skin he burned up with fire outside the camp. This time it's very clear, outside the camp. Burning air is not smoke. Outside the camp, that's the view. Anything in particular, or to keep going? Because we got to
Keep going.
Joyce over here is chomping a bit.
Let's wait.
Well, through 14. Then he killed the burnt offering, and Aaron and his sons. Oh, wait, blood and threw it against the side of the altar. They handed the burnt offering to piece by piece, and the head, and he burned them on the altar. He washed the entrails and the legs and burned them with the burnt offering on the altar. So he's done an atonement offering, then a sin offering, now a burnt offering. Keep going. Stay tuned. Go next one.
Yeah.
15 through 17. Then he presented the people's offering and took the goat of the sin offering that was for the people and killed it and offered it as his sin offering, like the first one. He presented the burnt offering and offered it according to the rule. He presented the grain offering, took a handful of it and burned it on the altar, besides the burnt offering of the morning. Anything? Keep going. Right. 18 through 21. Then he killed the ox and the ram, sacrificed peace offerings for the people. And Aaron's sons handed him the blood, and he threw it against the side of the altar. But the fat pieces of the ox and of the ram, and the fat tail, that which covers the entrails of the kidneys, and the long lobe of the liver. He put the fat pieces on the breast, and he burned the fat pieces on the altar. But the breast and the right thigh were weight for weight offering, as Moses commanded. You go. Notice how it's showing that Aaron and his sons have participated in every offering that God has brought them. Okay. All right. Finish the chapter 22 through 24. Then Aaron lifted up his hands towards the people and blessed them. And he came down from offering the sin offering and the burnt offering and the peace offerings. And Moses and Aaron went into the tent of meeting. When they came out, they blessed the people, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the pieces of fat on the altar. All the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces.
I think that would burn down the tent.
And yet, God is like a surgeon. He can do whatever he wants. He comes out. It kind of reminds me, for those of you who've been reading the whole Bible in a year, not that long ago, we had Elijah on Mount Carmel with the 900 prophets of Baal, and God sends down the fire and it licks up all, it doesn't burn up the rocks, but it does all the water and wood and the sacrifice. Out of the tabernacle, Moses and Aaron go in, they bring this offering to God, they come back out, they bless the people. God from the tabernacle comes out, takes the offering, burns it all up, and shows his glory to all the people.
I would have been the one to look away from split. Turn around and be like, "Oh,
Everybody else is on their face now. They're like, guys, did you?
It's be weird. When you went to a fire, did you see the glory of the fires? And it were beautiful and panicky and, well, maybe not firemen, but when you see a fire, how do I don't think it's all the glory of God in the fire.
Glory to God. When you were younger, you could go to see. God, so. Not the glory, but.
Maybe there is a little freedom.
That is a little.
All right. We got it. We get to, it's that notion of, I've been trained for this, this is what I'm made to do, and I finally get to do what I was made to do.
No, it's not happening, no. I might start. Oh.
And Pastor Cameron did not say.
No, because the moment they get done and they've done everything to the prescriptions of what God has said, and they bring that forward and they come out and they bring God's blessing, immediately God puts the exclamation. And maybe they did until that point. But in that moment, God says, you are my beloved priests, and I'm pleased with what you have done. Said that intentionally.
That's like, it's not, thanks for the food. Think about stories I've read from people whose houses or churches caught fire and how a Bible did not burn up, or another piece that was very valuable to the person did not burn, but everything around it did.
Yeah, I mean, there's always these interesting stories. I'm sure you guys.
There was one for sure, guy perished in the fire, in the room that he perished in, we had a hole through the floor. And there was several pictures on the wall that the rain was smoke covered with pictures of Christ.
When we had our fires. Spring. Was underneath those same page never.
what does it mean? It's you.
You were there.
She remembers, she was out.
That's right.
Yeah,
I did more written in invisible.
What?
Everything was written.
You know. Yes, we need to remember, they're just a year out from those miraculous things. They've seen God do all these things. They've seen that the pillar of cloud was there. They've known God's presence, heard God's voice. But remember, prior to this moment, only Moses and potentially Joshua had actually seen God's glory. Remember that Moses had to put the veil in because they were like, whoa, dude, you're a little too bright. Stop shining. And in this moment, everyone is made right. Everyone gets to see God's glory. Except for Steve Christner, who's turned around the wrong way and
How many times did the people say to Moses, no, you go talk to him. We can't.
And yet in this moment, everybody still gets God saying, I hear you, I'm gonna respect what you've asked. But you're because you've been made right with me, I'm gonna show you all. And this, if you have never heard it before, this truly is proof that God meets us where we are. Because he wants us to be made right. Even when we don't know what to do, even when we don't know what to say, he sends his representative, which we now know to be Christ, who makes atonement for us, so that we can experience his glory. All of this, we've just read in these 9 chapters, is a foreshadowing of what he does through Christ on the cross.
Here it is. Okay, but,
I'm giving this to you. Make the most of it. Make the best of it. Be my priests to the world. I've done this for you, and you did not deserve it, and I've asked you to be my representatives to the rest of the world, and they didn't deserve it either. Just imagine, even 40 years later, when they were entering into the promised land, those generations that were under 20, you think they would still remember this day?
I think so. They fell down, they said, shouted for joy.
In a literal and figurative and spiritual sense, that image was burned in their head. Yeah, I don't think you could ever forget an experience like that. People can question your beliefs. People can question your words. They can question even your experience, but cannot take it away from you. You have experienced what you have experienced. And when you have fully experienced the love of God, when you have fully experienced God's peace, mercy, and forgiveness, there's nothing to take that. It's probably a good place to stop, isn't it, right? But Lord, we are amazed that these 9 chapters, who prior to this moment may have been foreign to us. Maybe we would have even seen them as something a little gross and disgusting, maybe even violent, borderline evil. Yet, as we've read this beginning of this book of Leviticus, we're seeing your love for us. Your willingness to come and meet with us, even when we don't deserve it. Your willingness to bestow your righteousness and your holiness on us. And Lord, your call for us to be your priests. And Lord, may that truth be burned on our hearts. May that truth be burned in our minds. Lord, we might live lives that honor you and show your glory to the world through us. We pray this in Jesus' name. So next week, we'll see how they screwed up already.